And as I plugged it in, I'm coming onto the slip road onto the M4, and I put it into the lighter, and I immediately lost 6 cylinders of the 12, and everything on the dashboard lit up. And clearly, the LSD is strong and working well in Chris Cooper's area.
I've got Skid gave me a good supplier.
Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of the Car Podcast with me, Chris Harris, and his little friends. We've been up to lots of things in the last week, but we're going to start off discussing the state of Formula One. Everyone's headed to Melbourne. All the drivers seem to be on the ground. Their social media accounts are up and running for another busy year of useless shite. And now we're going to see who is fast and who is slow. There's been plenty of pre-season testing. I bet Chris Cooper's been following the runners and riders. So we'll pass over to him for a brief synopsis of where we think the teams are and the drivers are.
So there are 4 rookie-ish drivers this year. The most famous of whom got the most coverage is Kimi Antonelli, the guy who stepped into Lewis's shoes. He's quite confident. He's quite touchy-feeling with other members of the team. For an 18-year-old, he's sort of like, all right, son, calm down.
He looks 12. Doesn't he?
Say again?
He looks 12.
He looks even younger. He really does. Yeah. But of the 4 drivers, so Bortoleto, driving for Sauber, he won F2 last year. Isaac Hadjar was runner-up. He's gone to the Racing Bulls. And then Ollie Beerman won 3 races. So of the 4 drivers graduating, he's actually got the weakest record in F2. Bortoleto, what august company is Bortoleto in amongst other drivers in the F1 grid this year? Manish, you must know this.
Wine.
Shall I help you out?
Yeah.
Along with Oscar, Charles and George, he's one of only 4 drivers to have won the F3 and F2 championships back to back before getting into
back. Yes.
That's how you earn your spot on this podcast. We love stats like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will hand over in a minute, but I think bold predictions. Lots of the chat and social media and all the stuff on Sky and everywhere else has been, well, it's going to be about Max and Lando this year. I think the 2 drivers this year could be about. One of them is Lando, the other one is Oscar. One of those 2, Oscar's got to put one over Lando this year. Lando can't do anything other than go one better. One of them is going to be mightily disappointed at the end of this year. I have a sneaky suspicion that Oscar, if he can do a bit about making the tyres last a bit longer, because that's quite important apparently, I think Oscar could be, I quite like him. He's very dry. He's very witty. He's got very, very dry sense of humour. Man after my own taste in that regard. If anybody hadn't noticed so far. So I think, this year, watch how, because everything's been rosy and lovely at McLaren. They were at the Autosport Awards on the next table to us when we had a lovely evening there. They're all high-fiving. It's all wonderful, and Zach's wonderful, and Andre's wonderful. And no one spotted that they've got 2 drivers who both think they can win the World Championship because they've got the fastest car. Can't wait.
Could be fireworks. Manish?
I was looking at the team orders, and it's amazing how the order of the teams, I should say, and it's amazing how the consensus seems to be McLaren is the car, and you will just not find a journalist who doesn't say McLaren is the car. And Karan Chandok pinged me a text just before he headed off to Australia, saying, "Oh, hope all's well with the Luca movie. When can I see it?" And I said, "Who's going to win?" And he said, "Oh, I think it's Lando," which I thought was just a pretty full-on prediction. It's amazing how people think that McLaren, I mean, they may well be the quickest in testing. They may even have been sandbagging and be really quick in testing. But as you know, you saw the Red Bull last year, fantastic dominance. Then bang, McLaren came back. And then bang, in the third act, Red Bull came back. So I think there's going to be a bit of a development war. And I think making predictions this early is possibly fatal. So I think
it's more fun, though.
Of course. So look, McLaren seemed to be the quickest car. I would argue probably Mercedes just after them. And I think George Russell, is a proper dark horse, that guy. Of course, he's never been in a world championship title fight. You wonder even if he is in the running, whether his head's in the right place, given that he's never been there before in the last quarter of the season. Experience counts for something. It looks like Ferrari are the third quickest. It's a horrible thing to say, but I just don't think Lewis is going to be in the game against Leclerc. I just don't think I think Leclerc, he's so quick, that guy, and given the right car now. You saw him. I was one of the first going, oh, no, did the wrong thing, should have kept signs. But he really just put him away in the last third of the season. I think he's an incredibly fierce driver. Neil's got his hamburger torch out, and has big teeth, and looks like it's about to bite bits off me for what I've just said.
Lewis. Come on, Lewis.
Come on, Lewis.
Does your hamburger have daylight running lights on it? It looks like it's got DRLs like the front of a Hyundai or something.
It's a cheese in that. And then all I'd say is that people are really not talking too much about Max. And I think he's the best driver in Formula One. And I think that car may or may not be the bee's knees to start with, but that boy is going to wring its neck and drag that team, Newey or no Newey, Vacht or Vacht, no Vacht. It doesn't really matter. You just cannot count a guy that good out of a championship. And so, look, it's going to be a fantastic season. Every time I make a prediction, it totally balls us up. But I think, it's going to be between, for me, Leclerc, Lando, and George Russell. I think with Max as this little dark horse, just right there if they slip up at all.
I agree wholeheartedly with all of that, actually. I 100%. The great thing about having a weekly podcast is we can make weekly predictions. So you can make a prediction now, and then we can just wipe it from history, and we can re-predict next week. So don't worry. I've been looking at the times in testing and trying to read some of the public utterances. Helmut Marko is a thing of joy at this time of year because he just starts his shit stirring. And he's always dropping little bombs. He's already trying to undermine Lewis. He's going, well, we've looked at their Ferrari's long runs. They're not bad, but Leclerc's much quicker than Lewis. So he's already started just to needle that one. And he's needling everywhere. But the thing I most agree with Manish is this. I think I'm not sure it matters who's going to be the quickest in Melbourne. I think, and I do think that McLaren, from what we're hearing, is the quickest car. But how often actually does testing bear no resemblance even to the first race? But I think Max Verstappen is the fastest driver in Formula One. He's got something about him. I don't often rewatch races, but I rewatched Brazil last year. That is up there with a Donington 93 and a Barcelona 96. That is up there with those. And there's no obvious tech advantage he's got. He's not on a different treaded tyre. There's no obvious thing you could point and go, that's why you were in hero mode. I mean, the car might have had something we didn't know about. I don't know. But it just, the formula is pretty tightly policed now. And I just think that a few races in, the Red Bull will probably switch on or they'll find something in it. And suddenly Max will be back. So I want Lewis to win because I'm a Lewis fan. I'd like Lando to win. I think it'd be a good story for Formula One.
Yeah.
I'd put all my money on Max.
Wow. You put all your money on Max. Wow.
He's ferocious.
Yeah.
I agree.
It really is.
Yeah. Doesn't give a shit. Will kill everyone to win.
He just, he's just a monster in the car. So, but it's like organising a massive night out with your mates. You spend a year organising the biggest night out, meet up with all your uni mates, and there's so much pressure placed on that night to deliver. It turns out to be shit, and everyone's really picking up the season, and it's one of those ones where we could have a dark horse that runs away with it, and it kills it too early on. So I just hope, for the sake of Formula One, that it can deliver on the promise, because all of us have picked this up. Like, this is the one. This is box office.
Yeah.
Anything else technical about the cars that we should know about? They look fairly straightforward to me. It's one of those weird lull years, isn't it, before the big change of 26?
Yeah.
So they're just sort of eking out what's left of this technology window. So they know what they're doing. They'll be very reliable, won't they?
Who's watched Drive to Survive?
Well, that was going to be my point. How
I thought
bloody
it might be
brilliant
yours.
is that program? It is. It is. I know Manish won't like it. It's brilliant. Every single bit of it. I've watched 4 now. And, I think it's really good. The camera work. I know they're all acting up a little bit. Suddenly, Toto has gone from a bit of a stiff old wooden board to some sort of Oscar-winning actor, isn't he? But I think it's really good. I really enjoyed it actually, and all of the sort of the angle of Max versus Lando. Obviously, I want Lewis to win. If not, obviously, you want Lando to win or George, I suppose. But yeah, probably it's going to be Max. But I think that the program really does lubricate one's excitement
Lubricate. That's a great word.
for the
It is.
weekend,
I fully approve of that adjective.
isn't
Right.
it?
Noun.
I think he used it as a verb.
Yeah. Can I just introduce that point? If we could have an F1 driver's dad on this podcast, who would we choose? I wonder, Mr. Harris, who would we choose?
I'll come back to that later in the podcast.
Okay.
How's that?
Yes,
for you?
Lewis's dad would be good.
Yeah,
Lewis,
but
that'd be
it'll be interesting.
And would Anthony come on the pod, Manish, you reckon?
I'm sorry. Yeah, of course he would.
yeah,
Anthony
great.
would come on.
Anthony, we'd love to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I like this one. And anything else on F1, by the way? We're very relaxed and casual tonight. We're recording on a Monday night. Everyone's a little bit sort of dressed down and easy. I like this. No one's
yourself.
talking over each other. We're quite relaxed. So anything else on F1? Any liveries that excite you? Any
What time is it? Have we got to get up at 6 a.m. or something?
4 a.m.
Yeah.
earlier?
4
Is it?
a.m. 4
It's one of
a.m.
those exciting ones.
4 a.m. on Sunday morning.
Yeah,
think so.
we will be in Cornwall. You can come and knock on my door,
I won't
or
be.
I'll come and knock on your door. But we've got to head out, okay? Because I feel not everyone's going to want us to watch
I'm
this
not
at 4
there
a.m.
Sunday. I'm not there Sunday.
I knew.
Oh,
But
Come round to our place.
Quali is Saturday morning early at 4 a.m. Is it?
Yeah, it's quite early. So before you leave, it'll be on. We can go and watch Quali together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Lovely.
This is the first in a new irregular series entitled Young People in Cars Don't Listen to This, Close Your Ears. When the fuck did that happen? Which I think is, again, Neil, with those mots juste, has correctly described that moment when you're driving along and you see something about the road network or the cars around you that has just crept up on you. And suddenly it's become actually really common. And you say to yourself, when did that happen? It must have, it's either just happened overnight or I've not noticed that there's been a profound change in that. Or it could be a button inside a car. Or it could be a lane change. Or it could be a bus lane. Right? Well, it could be anything about the car or the road network. And given that it was Neil's idea, it must mean he's got something to get off his chest. So, Neil,
Yes.
what do you need to get off your chest?
Well, this came to light because from last week's 2-car garage, you selected the Honda S2000. And as always with these things, you instantly go to piston heads on the next day after and think, fuck, I had one of those. I shouldn't have sold it because I had a lovely blue car with that lovely light blue.
Yeah.
With the black leather, with a hard top, factory hard top, all perfect. I might go and have a look at getting one of those. Chris is right. I can't believe it. This is just a shocker that I've forgotten how good that car is. And you think, well, they're all about 8,995, and maybe I'll get a Minter for 12. They're fucking 25 grand. And I said to myself, when the fuck did that happen?
oh dear.
It's a bit like, and so my reference is the Honda S2000 because now I'm just annoyed, that I don't own one because actually there's suddenly, it's that ridiculous overpowering urge to suddenly get this car. And the only thing that matters in life is owning one of these cars. And even though I've got too many fucking cars anyway, I need a Honda 2000, S2000. And suddenly they're out of rational reach because
Yeah.
you remember when they were 4995. And it's a bit like the R34 GTR UK car. I remember
Yeah.
going up to that amazing whatever he was. I think his dad was a racer or something. The Liverpool dealership for
Middlehurst.
Nissan. Yeah, Middlehurst. And I know the son actually, and I think the dad races, doesn't he?
He's a racer.
And, yeah, good racer. And I bought out of their showroom an R34 GTR, one of the very rare. I think it was only 28 UK officially imported cars for about 30 grand. Kept it for a couple of years, put it on piston heads, and some bloke from Austria turned up with 50 grand in a suitcase and bought this car off me. Came to my office, and he had to come with me to the bank to make sure the money wasn't dodging. I thought, what an absolute entrepreneur I am. Those cars are about £1 million now.
Yeah.
They're literally £250,000 a UK, with all the specially etched glass for whatever reason. I don't really understand it, but it was a grey car. Maybe that's a discussion for later. But yes, when the fuck did that happen? Was the S2000 Honda at 25 grand for a low mileage car?
Shocking times. Shocking times.
Yes.
Don't even talk about integrales. Right. Chris Cooper, his name is Crashy Chris on the YouTube feed,
Yeah.
which was actually put up by his son. It seems very harsh at the moment.
Yeah, just a
There we
bit
go.
harsh, but
Yeah.
possibly fair.
Yeah. Go on then.
I think this is about laws of gravity that you thought you could rely upon, and now you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
One of, I think, the immutable, certainly in our lifetime of enjoying cars and knowing people who've been able to enjoy nice cars and buy them and so forth, in our lifetime has been that fundamental taxonomy of a BMW M3 and a 911. When times are good, you'd always hear in the 2000s in particular, people who are in the motor trade or the motor finance profession would say, when times are good, all my clients want to go and find a 911. They want me to finance a 911. When times aren't so good, tough year, they'll be trading down from that into an M3 with an M4 now or M3, M4 now. M3, M4s are now the price of 911s. When the flipping fick did that happen? You go onto Auto Trader, M5, M4, there are 115, 120, 125 grand. That's proper good 911 money. When did that happen? When did BMW think it was okay to take that car, which knows its place? It's not as though 911s are cheap as chips these days. When and how did that happen? M3/M4s are now 911 money.
Yeah.
Lord above.
I know. Manish.
For me, it was the Tesla. I used to see a few, and it was somebody who owned his own advertising agency. Usually he lived in North London, had about 10 zeros after his net worth. They were all navy blue with some kind of leather inside. He was 3 standard deviations above a Prius, and now they are everywhere. When the fuck did that happen? Well, really, when did the Tesla become ubiquitous and not the sole provenance of a city lawyer, an investment banker with a conscience, and an advertising executive? What's that all about? Dreadful cars. I understand it as a second, third, or fourth car, but when did that happen?
Clever cars, though.
He's clever.
Yeah,
He's got people to buy them, I think.
Yeah.
I think one of the most shattering examples of this that I've experienced recently is about a road. So there's a road that runs in South Wales from Chepstow to Monmouth and goes on beyond there, called the A466. I've driven up and down it for a long time. Had quite a well publicised crash on it as well. That wasn't my fault. There was just a bloke across the road and I whacked him.
Of course not.
No one hurt. It's a great road. It's a road that's enjoyed by cyclists, by people going up in their motorhomes, by motorcyclists and by car drivers alike. I was driving along the other day and I thought, they've taken too many trees down here. I used to like this tree thing. It was good. In places it was dark and funneled. Now it's too open. You can actually see into the Wye Valley. And I looked around, I thought, fucking everyone's going a bit slow here. Get a move on. So I just, on the straight bit, I went past them and I got a load of bloody anger. I was like, okay, there we go. I wasn't going fast. And then I realised I went past 2 signs that said 30. And the authorities have just changed 10, 15 miles of the best road from a national speed limit into 30. And it's a really weird thing, isn't it? On reflection, you think, I can understand they have the reasons for doing it, but it makes me not want to live in the country anymore. I just had a massive reaction to it. I thought, why?
Yeah.
What? Fucking
That's
killjoys.
really...
At 30, I think they might have, but I think they realised they made a mistake and they've bumped it up to a 40. So, just another £500,000 on road signs probably that lasted a week. There's a road sign there that comes out of a village where if you're driving, it goes 20 for the new Welsh Village blanket speed limit. 30 yards later, there's a 30, and 30 yards after that, there's a 50. So you just see 20, 30, 50, and you're through them in under a second in a road car. I mean, I'd love to meet the person that said, yeah, we're making this a 30. Because I just reckon they're the most joyless person. If they see someone smiling in a restaurant, they go over to them and they berate them for smiling. Because I just couldn't believe it. I thought, why does this have to be a 30?
How selfish and bourgeois.
When the fuck did that happen? I know.
That's been happening for a while.
Share your stories about these speed limits that have come in. I mean, it's just every other part of our lives gets faster, and every generation demands more speed. People they want faster internet. They want their mobile telephones to work faster. But cars, no, they've got to go slower. Every year they have to go slower.
Yeah, even though
Very
the
strange.
cars are designed to go faster.
Yeah, very strange. Very strange. Rant over.
Yeah.
Let's move on. On the agenda, next on the list is the colour grey. Okay, I'll start this off very quickly.
Yes.
And I'll hand over to Clifford, who's chomping at the bit. I look at the Instagram messages now and again. I'm not very good at that. People know that. I just I don't really look at them much. But I was in an airport last week. I thought I'll have a look at that, and there was a photograph of a 996 GT2 non-club sport, and it was just, I don't know what the guy's name was. He said, in fact, I'll look it up for you so I'll get his name later on. He said, is this your old car? And it was my old car. And it was a 996 GT2 Club Sport in, I think, my favourite shade of grey,
What is it?
Slate.
Yeah.
Slate grey on a Porsche is a really complex colour because unlike all the others, there's something about it that makes the panel work seem more three-dimensional. It's got a depth to it, and it's a really, really beautiful colour. And I reminded how good it looked and how great that car was. And I had my son with me, and I said, I remember we sold this just about 2 weeks before you were born because I couldn't see why you'd take a young child around in a GT2 in the wet like I used to with no traction control. But there you go. It's Slate for me. Neil, where are you at with it?
I have a funny relationship with grey. Love-hate relationship. I don't particularly love it, apart from the ones I own, because I sometimes look at a grey car. It looks actually quite good.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's the slate grey. That's my old car, my slate grey GT2 there. Sorry, Neil,
Yep.
carry on.
it is, because I had what's the 991 Agat?
Yeah.
Slightly off
It's got
grey.
a tiny bit of bronze in it.
Yeah, slightly.
Tiny, not enough actually
No,
to do with the
it's
raw
grey.
bronze.
Yeah.
Because the 991 Touring, which I stupidly sold, I know where it is actually, but anyway, I didn't want black. I didn't want white, which frankly I should have done white, because that would have been a really great bloody 991 Touring in white. So I avoid white wrongly, I think. I didn't want guards, which I probably should have done. I didn't want blue for some bizarre reason. I probably should have done. So I went agate grey, and then when it arrived, I thought, why the fuck did I do that? You know what I mean? It's just a bit of a. It was a slightly disappointing colour. My Espada, which I with Colin Clark, the beautiful Colin Clark, who's now retired. This is when all classic cars were super cheap. We did a full restoration on a Lamborghini Espada, including the car, for 60 grand, about 2008. And UK car, he said, I've got one. I will do it all. We'll completely rebuild the car, new engine, new gearbox, new. You can choose the colour of the interior. We'll paint it any colour you want. Be a brand new Espada. And I thought, I'm going to do a sort of 1970s Italian business entrepreneur that drives daily from Bologna to Milan. And he's going to do this Agnelli dark grey with orange tan. And I did the whole thing. And when it arrived, I thought, why the fuck did I do that colour? We should have done something a bit more interesting. So even though I like this sort of perception of it being a chic colour, I'm always slightly disappointed with it. And I always wish it was another colour apart from grey. So I struggle a bit with it, to be honest. Even though often it's the compromised choice if you don't want to be flashy.
Interesting.
I know Manish loves it.
Go on, Manish. What do you reckon?
I think something like a deep metallic grey, if it's got metal in it, I think cars can look wonderful. Do you know what's the colour that Ferrari comes in that's sort of gunmetal? It's so deep and shiny. And
They've got a lot of greys.
Titanio Grigio, I think they call it, don't they? Grigio Titanio,
That's
something like that.
Blue in it.
No, that's the colour of my 458 that you came in Rome. That's a light colour.
But the point is that it goes from grey to silver by having some metal in it. My bugbear are these sort of battleship grey cars that you see everywhere now, and they're gloss or they're very slightly matte. And I think they just look dreadful. They're very nondescript. They make anything that might have a vaguely interesting shape, and I find modern cars very brick-like, look even worse in that grey. I don't get the aesthetic.
Do you mean the matte paint, Manish? The sort of G-Wagon matte paint? Or do
no, I don't mind the matte.
It means that primer grey colour,
exactly.
The primer grey that's become very popular on lots of cars.
Yeah. When I used to make models as a kid, because the official colour of things like Hawker Hunters and Tomcats was a gloss grey. The point is that they don't become gloss grey once they've landed an aircraft carrier twice. But my problem, when I used to paint these planes in that colour, I mean, they just all looked dreadful.
They did,
they
too
all
glossy.
looked really drab. There was something about the lines you lost. And I just think it's such a non-colour if it's not metallic in some way, shape or form. I mean, I do know the agate grey that you were talking about. And do you remember that oddly became, doesn't Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, he says something like, she comes in form, something like, on the forefinger of a thingy, an agate. It's so beautiful. He describes an agate stone on the, well, it's a very beautiful thing that he says. I can't remember, but I looked up an agate. I remember then, because I didn't know what it was, a semi-precious stone. Maybe an agate grey, a true agate grey, it's kind of semi-translucent. Maybe that's a beautiful, wonderful, wishful colour, but the grey that modern cars come in. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen either a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Di Tommaso or something like that or a Maserati in a non-metallic grey. Can anyone remember something that looks like has anyone done one? Did they look good in it?
I saw a lovely non-metallic grey Enzo the other day, and I can't remember. I should know that bloody colour. The non-metallic grey in an Enzo. I thought, that looks quite good.
Wasn't the Enzo looking quite good? Because that's just a good looking one.
Frankly, the Enzo will look cool in any colour, wouldn't it? Really? Or a LaFerrari I've seen in that colour too. Actually, in that non-metallic. I mean, again,
Manish's point about the primer colour is interesting for me because I now don't like it on cars at all. But I had a press car that was a Imola grey, which is Audi's first battleship, proper, primer grey, and I really liked the colour. I thought it suited the car.
Yeah.
But I now realise that I liked it because it stood out. Back then, it was the only car sold in that type of colour.
Yes.
But a lot of these BMW i4s come in that color. A lot of BMW. So there's a lot of, and then the VW group took that color and put it all across Seat, VW, and so suddenly there were lots of these cars around, and it very quickly lost its luster for me. And I just, it's funny, isn't it? Once a color becomes too common, I was like, oh, okay. So this
You know,
thing that's
Chris, you know,
too
James-
wrong in the first place.
You know, James Bond's Bentley is battleship grey as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kind of classic. So it's not a new color. It's not something that people tried. But I've seen a Bentley, a non-blower in battleship grey, kind of from the period, and maybe that pulls it off just about. There's something about the size of the car, the presence of the car.
Isn't there an R-Type Continental in that color as well? I've seen
How much do we want one of those?
Mr. C, what do you think about grey?
So I was thinking, you were talking about Imola Grey there. The good people in the circuit of Imola must have been delighted when they heard that Audi was going to name a colour after them. And they said, "Oh, which one?" Grey.
Yeah.
Grey is divisive in our family. So I had this conversation with Finn and Cam today. I said, "Grey, what do we think?" And Finn said, And Cameron said, because he loves the film Wall Street, he said, "Grey is good. Grey is right. Grey works." I love that sort of stuff. My initial reaction was grey is the colour. Grey is a bit like going to a co-op or a spa store in like a holiday location, somewhere down by the sea or in the Cotswolds somewhere. And it's late on a Friday, and the only thing left in the cool cabinet is sliced mild cheddar. So what you have when nothing else is available.
And Westward Ho.
Westward Ho, yeah, with an exclamation mark. It's the one thing it has in common with the VW Up. They both have an exclamation mark officially in their name. But then I thought about it again, and Cameron said, "It's better than black." We don't like black. And actually, there is one car, I think, that does possibly only work in grey. It's a great car. The original Audi R8, I think it works best in that grey, that launch mid-metallic grey.
Because of the lack of contrast with the carbon side pods.
That's a very, very interesting. We need to come back to that one. So the carbon side pods have got to be contrasting, but not the black's too much contrast. The silver, no, that's not right. Take it away.
I mean, in fairness, what an incredible looking car, the R8.
The original one.
They knocked it out of the park. And also, what a way to launch the car. In Iron Man, one of the greatest action films ever made.
Yes.
Well, they sort of originally launched it. The shape appeared in that Will Smith film, I, Robot.
Yeah.
Yes.
They had all of those Audi nebulous, shapy sort of things in the future. There was an A2 in there, wasn't there? And an R8. So actually, grey can be good. Grey can work. Originally Audi R8.
PTS Stone Grey Metallic. This is a bizarre colour. I wonder if you can see it on here. There you go, PTS Stone Grey. It's a sort of
Yes.
It's got green and all sorts of weird colours in it.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting colour, Stone Grey.
My first call, I've got a picture of it on my wall, which I'm trying to dick around and show people. What the coolest grey car that got me into grey was the Steve McQueen 911. You see that?
Oh yeah.
That is him at Le Mans.
That's slate
driving his 911S.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought that is just the absolute bollocks. That early 911 in that slate grey.
That's the most famous slate grey. Yeah.
It was non-metallic at the time, and I think it's now become metallic.
No, it's still. I think it's still non-metallic slate grey.
I think Chris's would have been metallic.
Would it?
Yeah.
I'll send the guy a note saying, is it metallic or not?
Yeah.
I now want a 996 GT2.
So do I.
Yeah.
Cool. Costs so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Moving
I want
on.
a Mercedes 300 SL, but Mr. Crashy Chris says I can't have one.
I don't think so.
Gullwing.
No,
No.
107.
Something affordable, Neil.
Oh,
just want to.
okay.
If you can find a manual,
107.
you should get. If you can find a manual 107 300, you should get that. They're cool cars.
That's
Uber
So,
rare.
this I don't know how to introduce this anymore. Get the algorithm up, Chris, please. The our algorithm-based weekly car choice, snappily named feature is now at. There was a deliberate mistake in it. It should be 47,000, but it says 45, and it's been discussed openly in our group as a mathematical gag. So after we'd sewn up our sides because they'd split so much from laughing at this joke, we're left with choosing a shed that's £47,000. So it's no longer a shed, right? It's a £47,000 car on our algorithm. And we will probably stop this feature soon because I'm actually becoming quite fucking tired
Chris,
of it.
I was going to say, we can either abandon the feature or can we just reverse it? Can we just go back?
Good
down?
idea. Let's go back down again. What a good idea.
go back down.
Yeah, great. We don't have to go back up to 150. Good, we'll do that. I like
Exactly.
that.
Let's go back down.
Excellent. It should be down to 500 quid as soon as possible.
I'm in.
£47,000. I'm going to ask Neil to go first.
Okay. There's only one word here. It's when you start thinking you can afford a Ferrari.
Oh no!
Yeah, I tried that.
Yeah,
Bastard.
it is.
Only two.
No, it is. And you go on to Piston Heads, and you go into classifieds, not auctions, obviously, and you go into Type Ferrari at the top, and then you click on Select All because you're feeling optimistic, and then you click on the little cross so you get the little menu, and you drag across the little thing, the little price marker, and you obviously can't do 47 because they're increments of 5. So you put 50, and then you go enter, and you fucking see what you're going to get. And you get, because I just did this an hour ago, and you get 20 Ferraris.
Oh.
So you get a bit of a dog-eared old Mondial with a bit
Mondial strong.
Yeah, 3 Mondials. You get a couple of leggy 360s, all in with the F1 box with about 50,000 miles that are sort of not a dealer that you've ever heard of. And it's probably Cat D hidden in the text. And then you've what else have you got? There might be a few automatic 4, 5, 6s in there.
But
there's
here's the one I
one.
should have bought. Ooh.
All Penguins. Not as good as a club, but almost. You go for the 612. You think, fuck it. If I'm going Ferrari, I've got to go V12. And you know what? The 612, look at it.
It's a lovely looking thing.
It was the ugly duckling for 15 years.
Still is.
It was who the fuck designed that car for years?
Wasn't it? Every day.
And suddenly, it looks like a 275 with that lovely line going down that wing. You can justify it to the wife because it's got 4 seats. You can fit the kids in the back. And this one is low mileage at 61,000 miles. It's got the very rare Scagaletti F1 gearbox in our Nürburgring with Nero Carpa, and it's got an updated stereo with a doubled-in equipped satellite navigation rear parking cameras that have obviously been welded on or glued on from Halfords. But this is 47. What is it? 47,495. And actually, to be serious about it, the 612 is suddenly super pretty.
Yeah, I agree with that bit.
And it's more reliable than other Ferraris 4 seats.
Shut up.
I never owned a 456 because of this podcast. I probably never will now. I can live vicariously through the pain of my learned friend. but I did have a 612.
You
And
did?
it was
Well,
interesting at times. I
Go
remember
on.
going down the M4 and I needed a phone charger because I had a phone call to make or had to receive a telephone call.
yeah.
And I went into Lee Delamere, bought myself a phone thing, one of the cheapy ones that would go into the lighter. And as I plugged it in, I'm coming onto the slip road onto the M4 and I put it into the lighter and I immediately lost 6 cylinders of the 12 and everything on the dashboard lit up. So I phoned up Matthew, or one of our usual friends, said,
Oh dear.
"Okay, I think I traded it. It had no warranty." And he's gone, "Yeah, that happens." So you really can't, because if you plug accessories in, they're liable to shit the ECU. And it was the ultimate version of the 575 Maranello engine. That was the last of that line of. It'll have a name like Columbo or some other detective.
Yeah.
And it was the last of that development engine. The next engine was the one that came out in the FF, and it was a much more sophisticated engine. So it had 2 ECUs. Effectively, it behaved like 2 inline sixes in parallel. And it was really unreliable for me. I did several ECUs, lots of other bits and bobs broke on it. It's a great car. I'd love to have another one. I fear it's one of those cars that if you bought one at 61,000 miles and it's been used, someone else has taken all the pain for you, a bit like a TVR, and it's all fixed.
Yeah.
And honestly, they've got proper rear seats. So you can have an adult behind an adult. I've done 180 miles an hour 4 up in the back in the day when they were new. We tested it. You could shout at each other 180, and it had fantastic stability. They'd been to Nardo and pounded around at really high speed to get it right. It's a
great, and I think it's really pretty now. I think it's really pretty.
I always loved them, and I perversely went for I bought one that had the HGTC wheels, and I put it back on the small. Like I had the small. They were like 17s. It looked ridiculous. Everyone else looked ridiculous, but I loved it. That was a great car.
Can I just say that I'm relying on my sat nav for the journey that we were going to make, and I was hoping to use exactly that accessory on the car. So probably a bad idea.
You've got many more problems before that happens in the 456.
Hooray!
Yeah, just follow one of us.
I will.
Okay, manage £47,000.
Actually, there's only one car. I'm going to make a big deal of this, but it's this.
Oh, Fulvia.
Ooh,
Lancia Fulvia from 1971.
3 of them.
No.
It's an HF, clearly.
It's an HF, exactly. It's an HF. It's only got 17,079 miles. They've all probably been accrued rallying, but it's beautiful. 1971. You could see Luca driving around in one of those. That would be in my shed at $47.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Great car. Mechanically, I mean, how interesting the car. It's a front-wheel drive V4 rally car. I mean, just interesting. Chris Cooper.
I did the Ferrari thing as well.
Oh, good.
You think it's got to work. There must be something interesting. There must be
on the edge. Yeah.
And then you look at it and you think, oh, they look like they've had a hard life, and there's a 612 that Matthew's got at the moment. It's a manual.
Yeah.
That's winking at me. I think it's probably slightly too much money, and I can't really afford it.
That'd be 150 grand.
Yeah, it's about that.
Neil's definitely asked him how much it is then, because is far too accurate.
Yeah.
I know the prices of every car for sale.
That's done me in my negotiation then, Neil. Thanks very much. So anyway, this is quite an interesting price, isn't it? I had the Audi. There's an Audi R8 I saw in that grey. But you know what? I think it's got to be one of those.
Can't see it.
It's a Subaru Impreza P1.
Oh, wow. Yeah, great car.
44,750.
Good.
Ooh. It's got 55,000 miles on it. Seemingly no incendiary or other burning damage from putting an accessory into the cigar lighter.
Mm.
And I just think that blue, that sort of early 2000s peak Subaru, and it's 44,750. So our producer suggested he might do a little spreadsheet to compare all the cars we've bought against the target price. to see who's overspent or underspent or just got it in there. I know I'm going to lose that one because I've just overspent before Neil says it. But I think that we ought to, next week, we ought to get the producer just to show us the scores on the doors of actually how we've performed. Because I think hitting that target, the cumulative adding up of all of those,
Yes.
who got closest to target?
I've been very disciplined. The P1 is definitely another. When the fuck did that happen?
Yeah.
Because they were 17,995 for a decade,
Yeah.
and they doubled. They doubled in like 3 years, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were in the 30s for a while, and then there was a brief period. But I sort of thought I never had a P1, and at the time I just thought it's a one to have.
They were special things. I remember I deployed. First time I deployed my wear the wrong jacket to the organisation trick. So I had everyone at Autocar knew I was so scabby. I had my favourite jacket was my rally art jacket. It had an underlining jacket which was black with rally art there, and then it had the big proper rally art team coat that they'd given me, and I loved it. I lived in it, and I thought I turned up to drive the development P1 with Steve Sutcliffe, and I wore my rally art jacket into the foyer at ProDrive, thinking they're going to rush out and give me one of their jackets so I don't wear this one. And I just walked around ProDrive with everyone looking at me saying "tosser," and no one gave me a free jacket.
No.
but I thought it was worth a try. Give it a go. If you're in that, if you wear deliberately the wrong jacket, you often get given the right jacket, so you fit in. It's a good little ploy, that one. So I've gone. It's a curious car. This. What this does for me is it forces me into places where I say I should. Why haven't I owned one of those? Because that's the question. Why have I not owned one of those? And this thing is is really interesting for me. It's a Lotus, and it's a Lotus Esprit GT3. It's the 4-cylinder one that, and this is just really predates my time as a journalist, and I didn't ever actually get to drive one because the press car. I think the press car ended up being taken by that bloke that pretended to be Jonathan Palmer down to the south of France. I think that was the car he took, actually. So I didn't actually drive it. But I always remember some really powerful... It elicited powerful writing from the writers I really respected. I remember Evo...
It did.
Autocar, Car, saying, this has the best power-assisted steering of any car I've ever driven. It's amazing. It wiped the floor with whatever Porsche it was against in the twin tests.
96.
And it really stuck with me.
What year? 96?
I think it was 96. Yeah, they made it for a few years, or 97. But I've never driven one, and the Esprit is a curious old thing to drive. And the V8 ones have always been disappointing, I think. But this car, and we'll put the link up. It's a silver one I found. I can't find the bloody picture of it.
It's got special sort of lovely little cool little seats, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's got the old you could have it without the wing on the back as well. That's 56,000 euros, which I think by the time you've haggled is probably about 47 grand, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's something about I get accused, and we rightly get accused a bit. I don't read too many of the comments because most people hate me anyway. I'm quite comfortable with that, actually. I think a lot of it's always Porsches, always bloody BMW M cars. And you're right. The people that said that, you're right. And I think if I had a car like that, I'd be really proud to turn up to a car meeting and go, do you know, I've got an Esprit.
Yes.
That's much cooler than any Porsche, isn't it? An Esprit GT3 is probably cooler.
I followed one of those down to Cornwall, one of my trips last summer. They're so small. That's a beautiful. It's almost like it's sort of 80%, 70% size. You think, crikey, with that, it had the rear spoiler on it and those lovely wheels. That's one of my favourite alloy wheels from that period. Hasn't dated at all, those Alex. They look just as good now as they did then.
Is it turbocharged? It's a turbocharged 4. What's
Turbo 4? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're about 300 horsepower, I think, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't weigh much. No rigidity in the chassis, but I suppose that there's a direct genetic link to Colin, isn't there, with that car? That's still in many ways a Chapman Lotus, even though it was 18 years after he died.
And it was interesting that it was called GT3. Before GT3 was, I think it was predated 996 GT3.
Yeah.
And the 911 GT3 kind of begat FIA GT racing car GT3. So it'd be interesting if somebody who was in Hethel or in the general Norfolk area at the time could share with us the story as to how it became known as GT3, because that was a big name to carry, and it's carried it well.
Yeah.
Was it not a racing class at that point then?
No,
No.
it wasn't.
No.
No.
GT3
It really
was much
wasn't.
later.
I think
but
that,
last
that
week,
choice wins of that selection. You absolutely won heads down there, Chris.
I think
for
that's
that.
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't often win things like that. I'm very pleased, thank you.
Well done, you.
Jackanory time. So get a cup of Horlicks and put a rug over your lap and settle in, because Manish is going to tell us a story. I don't know what it's going to be about. It could be about anything. It could be about cooking Indian food. It could be about the fact that he knows a bit about a certain Brazilian racing driver. We've no idea where this is going. So the floor's open to you, Manish.
Thank you very much. So I am going to talk to you about a man called Eric Sidney Watkins, also known as Prof or Sid in Formula One. He was the Formula One doctor, and I say he was the Formula One doctor. I know there have been Formula One doctors since, but he was the first Formula One doctor. And I had the absolute pleasure of calling him a friend. And we became friends. That's literally the only word for it. So all of you beer pong players, it was over Senna. But I'm not going to talk about Senna very much in this at all. I met him because we felt he would be a very, very important voice in the film. But, you know, sometimes you meet someone in life and you just know you're going to be friends for life. And I knew that. We met for a coffee and we just completely connected. And I remember throughout the making of that movie and even afterwards, it was brilliant. He used to introduce me as Manish, the failed neurosurgeon, which is why he fixes bones. I just love that. And I've got to tell you very proudly, I think if I'd met him as a junior doctor, I would be a neurosurgeon now. There's no way I'd have anything to do with cars or filmmaking, because there are times in life you meet somebody who is so inspirational and so kind of complete as a person, they get you. And he got me. He just got me day one. And we became friends over a period of, sadly, and very sadly, actually, over 4 years, because that's all he had left. But I certainly didn't know that at the time. And I got asked by a guy called Richard Woods, who used to be Max Mosley's right-hand man. Richard used to be described as the Rottweiler of Formula One, the most terrifying person in the pit lane. And I love Richard. He's just a great guy, very bright, very on it, super loyal. And he loved Prof. And he asked me, I remember this in 2011, to go up to Kelso, which is where Prof had his home, on Berwick-on-Tweed, to do an article on him. And I haven't been a journalist very much. I've written exactly 2 journalistic articles in my life, but one was on Prof. And I flew up to Scotland, and we arrived at his house, and Prof was really into Glenmorangie. And before he would speak, he basically got me pissed on Glenmorangie. And thank God I had my kind of iPhone and was tape recording this. So he's got a very interesting life. He was born to a very working class family. And his father had been a miner who set up a mining engineering business. And he expected his son to basically take over his light engineering business, which built mine machinery. And when Prof was 14, he said to his father, you meet some clever people in your time, I tell you, this scarily brilliant man. And he said to his dad at 14, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. And his father said to him, no, you're not. You're going to go and run the family business. And he said, no, I want to be a brain doctor, Dad. And he said, well, if you want to be a brain doctor, you go and be a brain doctor, but you won't get a penny from me. And he told him this in 1942, when sort of university entrances, let's just say, were a little bit less democratic than they are now, when there was no level playing field. And he knew that's what he wanted to do. And he got himself into medical school. He went to Liverpool, and he was utterly brilliant. I mean, he just won every single prize. He had a way. He was a doctor's doctor, and it was very, very clear very early on that he had bloody amazing hands. He was just a fantastic surgeon. He, as a young doctor, did his MD thesis. So when you do your basic medical degree, before you go into your really higher work, you can do research. And he was actually in a tank regiment as part of his national service. And what he did his MD thesis on, so he's a doctor in the tank regiment. He's in the Middle East because Montgomery thought World War III would start in the Middle East. He was convinced. And he was always lobbying to make sure we had lots of assets in the Middle East because it was the only place he felt we could stop World War III happening. And Prof was really, really impressed by tank crews and how they survived extreme heat, extreme noise. I mean, people have no idea how noisy tanks are. And they don't have very much in the way of shock absorbers, tanks. So what he did was he did his MD thesis on environmental exposure of tank crews and their performance. So even as a young doctor, he was looking at people behaving in extreme environments and seeing how their performance drops off. I don't know if that gives you a hint as to what he goes and does with his life, but he was just really, really interested. So anyway, he became a consultant at the London Hospital, which at that time was really considered really the poor hospital. It's in the East End, it's, in the worst bit of London, but he really created and expanded the neurosurgical unit. And someone said to him, look, we keep having these accidents in Speedway. And Speedway, I didn't know this in the 50s and 60s, was always on dog tracks.
Yes.
What happened was you'd be this rider, you'd come off your bike, and you'd hit the post with your head, and you would either die or be terribly brain damaged. And the first thing he did was he got them to line all the posts around the dog tracks with polystyrene and big amounts of padding. Guess what? It massively reduced the death and concussion and, well, not the concussion rates, but probably, the brain injury rates. And very soon he got asked to become the kind of safety doctor for the British Grand Prix. So in 1978, he got a phone call from Bernie Ecclestone. And Bernie said, you're the British Grand Prix doctor, aren't you? And he said, yes. And he said, can you come and see me? Because I'd like to talk to you about something. And Prof went to see him. He didn't know what it was about. And Bernie said, I've got a problem with my right eye. Can you have a look at it? So Prof said, okay. So he got his ophthalmoscope out. He looks into Bernie's right eye and he said, I think you probably had a problem with that since you could walk. And Bernie went, ooh, very clever. You must know what you're doing, because that's Bernie. He always tests you. And he said, do you want to be the doctor for motor racing? Because we've got a problem with far too many people dying. It's not very nice, and we've got to get this sorted out. I think Bernie was obviously turning it into a TV sport and not particularly enjoying good mates of his and, drivers in general being horribly mangled or injured because of procedural problems. Motor racing is dangerous in itself. That doesn't mean you can't mitigate against risks and make circuits safer. And I remember Prof telling me that when he went to his first Grand Prix, it was the Argentine Grand Prix, he went to the medical center. It was a wooden hut that hadn't been opened in years. The first thing he did was open it, remove the dead flies. They found an old oxygen cylinder in there, which had clearly never been tested. That was the medical facility at the Argentine Grand Prix. He found out that the local hospital that you got taken to if you were injured was this very dodgy, reasonably not local joint. They basically stuck you in an ambulance, drove you a couple of 100 miles to a place where you would have been dead by the time you got there. So the first thing he did was he got on the phone to his medical mafia to find out what the best local centers were and made a deal with them to at least evacuate drivers. They put some proper medical kit into the hut. And then he said the next Grand Prix they went to was Watkins Glen. And they found out that at Watkins Glen, they had a medical car, but it was an old Vauxhall estate. And the anaesthetist used to just sit in the back like this with a little kit, with a sort of slightly mad driver. And that was the medical facility there. So, he sort of leant back and thought, I've got a bit of sorting out to do. And the worst story told about that year was he was there in 1978 at the Monza race when Ronnie Peterson was killed. And actually, there is some footage of him. You see the chaos. And he's got his doctor's bag and his blazer on, and he's running to Ronnie. James Hunt, if you remember, pulled Ronnie Peterson out of the car.
Yes.
And then James Hunt was so shocked by what he saw, he gave up racing 6 months later. And Prof told me the story. He said he went to see Ronnie Peterson. Ronnie was talking. They took him to the hospital. They fixed both of his legs. They took a long time doing it because he's a motor racing driver. They didn't want to do a botched job. They didn't want to ruin the fastest man in Formula One's career. But that's probably what killed him, because aiming for that perfection meant that some fat was probably released into his bloodstream, went to his lungs, and he died of a clot in the lungs. And he just realized so much needed to be done. You needed good medical facilities at the circuit. You needed a helicopter, not just on race days. He used to joke, because of course, accidents never happen in qualifying, do they? And he said, you have to have helicopters all the days. You have to have a medical delegate up there in the control tower so he can see. And in fact, he told a very funny story. He said in 1982, actually, no, it was early. It was a Grand Prix, sometime in the late 70s. Mr. Cooper, do you know somebody called Huske van Hanhausen or something like that? Huske van Hanstein.
No.
Oh, well, he was apparently the German delegate of the FIA, a very arrogant man. And he sat at the German Grand Prix where the medical guy was meant to be in the control tower. And he said, no, I am the FIA. I'm going to sit here. And Prof said, if he sits there and my medical delegate can't see the start of the race, we're going to have a problem. So he told Bernie this. So Bernie apparently stood at the front of the grid and just stood there and went, no one leave. You can't start the race. And Huske van Hanstein was like, what am I going to do with these 80,000 Germans? And Bernie said, tell them to fuck off. So Huske van Hanstein basically, he let the medical delegate sit in his chair. And so Prof started in all of this. And then his next great point was Gilles Villeneuve's death. He said that he was there in 1982 when Gilles had the accident. And he said the catch fencing caught him. And he said when he got to Gilles, he said his pupils were actually responding. His heart was beating really well. Fit motor racing driver, not brain dead. And he said they managed to get, the people held up the sheets around him. They got him to the medical center. By then, they could do an X-ray at the medical center. They could do various examinations. They couldn't quite work out where he was at, so they managed, because they had the helicopter, to fly him to Liège. There, they did a proper scan, and they saw that, unfortunately for Gilles, his first and second cervical vertebrae, so the first two vertebrae in your neck, had completely translocated. So Gilles was going to die. And he said one of the toughest things he's ever had to do in his life was speak to Mrs. Villeneuve and say, I know your husband's heart's beating. I know he's breathing with our assistance, and I know his pupils responding. But when we turn the machine off, he'll die. And that's your choice. But in my opinion, that's the right thing to do. And she did. And she did. And he said that was the bravest thing he ever saw. And anyway, we won't talk about Senna's death, but if you remember, 1994 was a horrible year. Roland Ratzenberg had been killed before Ayrton, and then Carl Windlinger was injured and went into a coma after a massive accident at Monaco 2 weeks after that. And Prof just happened to be in France at the time. It was a week later. And he was seeing a woman who said, oh, congratulations. And he said, congratulations on what? And he said, oh, you've been made chairman of the expert advisory committee on safety. And he said, have I? And then he called Max Mosley, and Max said, yes, sorry, I didn't have time to tell you, but that's what we've done. We've created this group. And he said, look, if you're really serious about making motorsport safer, Max, it's going to cost a lot of money. And Max said, you've got carte blanche. because I think they were panicking a little bit. 2 dead drivers, 1 in a coma. I mean, those cars were coming off left, right, and center. And, he commissioned tests at Mira. They did all kinds of things to Formula One cars. I just made a little tiny list of some of the things that they did. They widened seatbelts so that you'd get less chest injuries. They created side and front protection on cars. They created the removable U device around cars with the padding. Hands was created and made better. Collapsible steering wheels in Formula One. Foam in the nose cone. Proper compression zones in gearboxes. Other work was debris fencing to make the fencing safer, wheel tethers, all of these things. I mean, I think all of these things would have saved I always thought any 2 of these would probably have saved Senna's life. But the number of lives probably that have been saved by sort of Prof's intervention were incredible. And kind of my last story about him was that I remember Alistair calling me, his son, in the autumn of 2012, and I have the date, I can work out the date actually from this, said, Dad's not well. And I said, what do you mean not well? And he said, like, really unwell, not well. It was September 2012. And I said, where is he? And he said, well, you can go and see him. He's at the King Edward VII Hospital and on Beaumont Street. And weirdly, when I was a junior doctor, we used to do locums, and I'd done a few locums there because my bosses were surgeons there, and they put in a nice word, and you could go and do a 48-hour stint on a weekend where you weren't on call, earn some extra money. And I remember seeing him. It was awful. He was literally, days from dying, and it was hard to see such a great man in such a place. And a couple of times he came round. He certainly recognized me, recognized everybody in the room, and it was, there was nothing happy about it. But he went finally on the 12th of September, 2012, and it was, it was awful news when we got it. But I went up to his funeral, and it was in Berwick-on-Tweed, and I'll never forget. There was a lone bagpipe playing. It was absolutely beautiful. The great and the good came out of him. They really did. This was not a man who was liked. He was loved. And they put him into this beautiful casket with a giant salmon painted on it because he just loved fishing. And I remember, having a really special glass of Glenmorangie that evening and thinking, sometimes you don't have long with someone, but it's a lifetime. And that was Professor Sid Watkins for me.
Thank you, Manish.
Very, very good.
Lovely to hear that. And I implore anyone who hasn't read, I think there are 2 books by Sid. I think the first one is the seminal work, really, which describes a lot of what Manish spoke about. You won't read a more brilliant, sort of unself-regarding text. What he basically does is write exactly what Manish has said. We made Formula One safe, but he takes none of the credit himself, really. He somehow he managed to celebrate everyone around him, which is a sign of greatness, isn't it, really? But yeah, a remarkable man. I hope these are the catalysts for you to go and read about these people more and to learn more about their lives, because the impact he had was remarkable. Always remember, also had an addictive smile in photographs. He was always smiling, and he offset. So you had sort of Max. Max was sort of the Machiavellian one that was lurking. Max almost looked like he was wearing a cape to every race. He was sort of a bit Dick Dastardly. Bernie was just terrifying and 1 foot tall, and Max would have this massive fucking grin. Sorry, as Professor Sid Watkins would have this massive grin, and you'd be thinking, what's their dinner like tonight? It's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But thank you very much for that. That was lovely. So we're going to move on now to our 2-car garage. Here we go. I'll read it out properly for you. You like this one? You're a European TV producer in the late 70s, early 80s, any country you like. Blown away by the success of American cop private investigator shows, which are mostly the best shows ever made, aren't they? You're creating a show for your country. Of course, you hope other countries will take it. And the stars will be a spy super cop duo. Obviously, Manish has written this. Can we just make this show? One tough, rough, and working class who speaks with his fists. I wonder who you're talking about there. The other suave, sophisticated, and more of a detective. It's a cerebral part of the show. Two cars for the show, but they have to be the same company. You're getting a sponsorship deal with the company. I love this. So, where are you going with this, Chris Cooper, who I suspect has thought quite deeply and also probably read every word quite carefully?
So I was tempted to start this by saying, because it sounds a bit like Dempsey and Makepeace.
Yes.
With a British, and I thought Dumpty and Make War. Didn't like that. So I thought I quite liked. There was a 1970s, 80s British European thing sounded like this called Van der Valk.
Oh, I
yes.
remember him.
Van der Valk.
Yeah.
But I thought I need to make it a bit edgier. So he's not Van der Valk, he's Van der Drift.
Right, okay.
And I think his full name is Skid Van der Drift.
Yeah.
And he grew up.
There's a racing driver called Van der Drift, isn't there?
Chris Van der Drift, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Skid Van der Drift, he grew up in the tough streets of Rotterdam. Anyone's been to Rotterdam, it's quite gritty. And I reckon he would have been plying his trade as a rough, tough cop on that slightly edgy road between Rotterdam and Antwerp, Dutch-Belgian border. And his sidekick, I think she'd be Dutch. I think she'd come from the posh end of the Netherlands, which is a town called Wassenaar. Wassenaar is just to the northeast of The Hague, between The Hague and... It's the posh part of the Netherlands, if anyone knows about the Netherlands. And she'd be called... I think she'd be called Mireille, good Dutch name. Mireille Coffee Shop, that'd be a name.
Coffee shop.
Coffee shop. Mireille Coffee Shop, that'd be a name. Yeah. And they'd be that sort of edgy and slightly classy sort of combination. The theme music for this would be written, I reckon, by Tony Christie. He did all those cop shows and stuff in the 70s. Tony Christie wrote the tune. What would they drive? So I reckon they would love to have had the police car that was bought more in this country by any other, which is Porsche. The Dutch police had 507 911s over a 20-year period. So I reckon that Skid Van der Drift would have had a 911 SC Targa. Remember those Targas they had?
Yeah.
Nice.
He'd have had, he worn driving gloves at the wheel, so gloves to Manish, and he'd have worn, like that, they wore goggles. They wore goggles going down the motorway in this Targa 911. And they had that little, like, rotating flashing light thing on a little stalk just above the U frame of the Targa roof.
Mm.
And Mireille would have had a 928S, I reckon.
Nice.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen because Porsche said, bog off. It's just a cop show. So they'd had to go on to the indigenous supplier of vehicles in the Netherlands, which would have been actually Volvo, because they owned DAF, which is a Dutch car maker. So unfortunately, Skid Van der Drift didn't get in his 911 SC Targa. Poor sod. He got on a Volvo 360 diesel.
Oh.
Poor sod. But Mireille did okay. I reckon she'd have scored. Remember that? The coupe, the sort of chop top,
The
262.
262.
62C.
262C, Bertone coupe.
Only ever made them in silver. I've never seen another colour.
Yeah. So I reckon she'd have done all right. So Skid Van der Drift, Mireille Coffee Shop, Van der Skid, Van der Drift.
They had the buttons on the seats as well, didn't they?
Like the little button thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was lovely, and clearly the LSD is strong and working well in Chris Cooper's area.
I've got Skid gave me a good supplier.
Right, Neil with an N.
Another no budget job, Manish, presumably. Although I haven't really maximised the opportunity here on the no budget. Look, I'm going Jaguar. I think one of us has to go Jag. based in these two. Where are they based? Mid-80s, is it? Billericay. They've moved out from the East End, gone posh, gone out to Essex. Couple of Jags. God, don't we just love Jaguar? Has anyone seen the Jaguar driving around Paris
Yeah.
this week? Anyway, V12, two V12 Jags. Series 3 XJ, Van der Pla,
Yeah.
on an 85, on a, what's that be, a C?
Yeah.
Sort of back end of that, before it went a bit ugly, I never really liked XJ40 or whatever it's called, particularly with the square lights. I never got that. So I'm going Van der Pla, Series 3, lovely navy blue, tan. That's for the sort of sophisticated one. And then, of course, you've got to go XJS. I know this is a bit New Avengers. I almost went XJ12 Coupe, a bit of Steed in dark green.
Broad speed.
How much did we want one of those?
A lot.
Broad speed, bloody wide arches.
A
Yeah,
lot.
the actual car was for sale, wasn't it? It was a bit of a wreck about 10 years ago on Car and Classic. I wish I'd have bloody bought that, because that would just be the ultimate thing to rock up in Bicester, wouldn't it? Steed's XJ12 Coupe with those wide arches, no bumpers. Anyway, XJS V12 manual. What was his name in the New Avengers with the red XJS?
Gambit.
Gambit.
Mike Gambit.
I had hair
Mike
jealousy on Gambit. Yeah, he had great curl. Everyone had curly hair in the 70s, didn't they? I went through a short period of perming mine.
How's that gone for you?
That's another story.
Shave those bits off
And
as you
any
did it.
man that says they didn't perm the hair in the 80s, if they're in their 50s, is lying.
I never did.
I had curly hair.
I never did.
Oh, you don't know what it's like to live.
Well, that's true.
Yes,
That's
I agree
another
with that.
subject.
So two Jags, Series 3 XJ and XJS manual in red, probably black. Job done.
Love it. Manish.
Well, mine's a French show, and it's all about these two cops. One who's basically kind of Basque French, so he's really short, very brown, extremely hairy. Probably would have been a prop. He likes beating people up. He does not sit there going, "Please tell me what happens." He takes them to the back of this car and he just uses pliers on them. There's nothing subtle about this car. His name is Claude Marceau, okay? And his sidekick is Lionel de la Fressange. He looks like Dominique de Villepin. He's 6'4", has never punched a person in his life. He's just got this beautiful mane of white hair. And
It's
he
a
thinks a
gentleman
lot.
person.
Sorry?
It's a gentleman person.
He's a very gentleman person. He's always in a suit. And the thing is, I think this show always starts with the two of them eating, and it always ends with the two of them eating. With various, one of them's just very feral, the other one's just extraordinarily thoughtful. But I think all of their capers have to do with driving to places in France. So the name of the show is Les Chevaliers de la Route. They are the knights of the road. That's what they do.
Not the Knights of Ni.
Well, exactly. So Claude, I think, has a Renault 4, the Quatrelle. It's got 4 doors, or 5 doors, and it's the car that blends into anything. And I think it's a kind of very light 70s. This is 1979, 1980. He just blends into anything. He always does all the surveillance work. He's done a bit of work on this thing, so it's got a bit of poke. But that's not what they kind of do. They kind of go and find criminals. They know where the criminals are. One of them does the kind of really subtle, legal, thoughtful work. The other one just goes in and beats them all up. So that's what he does. And I think that Lionel de la Fressange has a bright red Renault 5 Turbo. Came out in 1980. And that is, you've got the Renault 4 and the Renault 5. One of them's a bit racy, but he's only racy on the inside. He's very calm on the outside, very cerebral. So, Les Chevaliers de la Route, directed by Manish Pandey. in 1980. A big hit.
I've not thought about this as deeply as you lot. So I don't have a name for my show, but it's a gritty cop show based in Munich. And this will give you an idea of the brand that I might be about to choose. We're 1980. I'll tell you why we're 1980, because that's the crossover date. Everyone, according to their age, has a crossover date when you became a functioning sort of person. I was born in 75, and I don't remember 79, but I remember 80. I remember 1980, but I don't remember 79. So I don't talk about the period 75 to 79 because I have no knowledge of it. So it has to be 1980 for me. And definitely two partners. They both drive BMWs, oddly enough, but it's quite critical what they drive. So it's a flat red, so non-metallic red, 323i.
Yeah.
But there was a curious one they made. The early cars had silver single wing mirrors on them, right? But then they did an integrated black plastic wing mirror on the E21 323i. Those mirrors were the better known mirrors, but the early cars in 1980 could be bought with a single mirror. And there's something about German performance cars that have one mirror. I don't know why. Is it because they look like pirates? Because they're like that, and you're like, that looks a bit bloody odd. That does. One ear's missing. But and they used to take advertising shots head on of these cars with the one mirror. They look fantastic.
They mean business.
Yeah. So the other car, in 1980, I'll need this checking, is better. So there's car envy going on. So you've got some hierarchy here, and it's all part of the story. I'm sure it'll get fleshed out as you learn about the characters. But it's a six. I think it's a 635 by 1980, but it might be a 633. And I still think the 635 is a superior car, but a 633 is the more interesting looking badge. And if I'm right, has a black plastic background, whereas the 635 is metal straight onto bodywork.
It's on an X-Reg, very early car, a 633.
Yeah, 633, yeah.
Yeah.
So those are my two cars. And I have to say, I'd rather have the 323i. That would be the one for me.
Twin exhaust.
Oh, my God. Remember when my dad bought his... I can remember the first one I saw of his when he'd had them before that, but I can't remember what those were like. But I remember coming home with a new one, white.
Those were Claro seats.
JA81, JAE 660X, I think it was.
X on an 80, yeah.
Yeah, fucking what a car.
Gorgeous.
Could have been either a 633 or a 635 in 80.
Is that the crossover year?
They did both. Looking at Wiki What's Your Face, yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, I'll have a 635 then, thanks.
Yeah.
So that's and that'll keep people happy that say I always choose BMWs. I just like them; they're really good cars.
They're really good cars.
Let's do some music.
We are open for sponsorship.
We're open for sponsorship. Neil Clifford, give us some music.
You know what? I'm just going Town Called Malice by the Jam. I'm having a bit of a... So I struggle to listen to the Jam, even though it was my life. But I listened. I was too young to really understand how brilliant is. I know I've said that before, as well as lyrics. You listen to just look at those words.
Yeah,
amazing, and what a tune.
Yeah,
Town Called Malice.
Manish.
This is going to be the theme tune for Les Chevaliers de la Route. And it's Edith Piaf's Rien de Rien. They solve crimes, they beat people up, they regret nothing.
Comme ci, comme ça.
So,
not the paciest tune to drag you into the action. What is it?
Quite a cool tune.
Chris Cooper.
It's interesting. Neil talks about perms in the 80s, which I definitely didn't have. I mean, it's about a million years would pass before I'd have had the courage or the curiosity to do that. Certainly the courage. My choice this week is a Scandi version of what a friend of mine used to call poodle rock. Heard of poodle rock? Poodle rock is that slightly disparaging description for big, ballady, bombastic American rock bands, Asia, Journey, where everybody had poodle haircuts. So big, very long poodle hair.
So there's a whole genre of music named after the style of haircut.
Poodle rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a Scandi. It's Aha. Aha.
Ah, okay.
Aha. No, not that Aha. Aha. Stay on These Roads is a bombastic, banging, brilliant tune.
Yeah.
And I
bad.
listened to it in the car on the weekend. I thought, that's my tune this week.
They did a James Bond, didn't they?
They did.
Living
Living
Daylight.
Daylights.
They did,
Oh,
yeah,
that
they
was
did.
a top tune.
It was.
I spoke to John Barry, weirdly, once at a wedding, and I said to him, what was it like working with Duran Duran and Aha for those two Bond movies? He said, I don't know, never met them. They recorded where they were. They sent over the tracks. I just made the tunes.
There was one of them had a big argument with him. One of them did. They went on. I remember this. They were on one of those chat shows, and they said they fell out with him because they didn't agree on what constituted a Bond theme tune. I think it might have been Aha.
Probably.
I'm going to Google it afterwards.
Because
They
he
were
didn't show up. He
87.
didn't want to meet him.
Yeah, probably didn't.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Jungle Boogie, Cool in the Gang.
Ah, great. Oh.
Because whenever I hear it in the car, I can't stop. Just sort of, it just makes my head toss music is what it's all about, isn't it? Really?
In the car.
Thank you very much for staying with us again for another hour and a half of car crap. A big thank you to Manish and his lovely story about Professor Sid Watkins. Please research him further. Chris Cooper and Neil Clifford, and we will be back to make your journeys hopefully a little less tedious next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.